Hello, my mayhem makers. Happy Friday. Welcome back to another week of Tula's Butterfly. We're working on the log cabin blocks this week, working on making the large, the medium, and the minis. Between all of those, you'll need to make 14 blocks, which is a lot of blocks. So we're going to focus on those three sizes this week and then the small size next week because there's 16 of those to do. So a lot to work on for the next 2 weeks, but don't worry because the week after that is really easy. So if you don't get all these done, please don't stress out. I tell you all the time, don't stress. You will have time to keep working on some of the more complicated blocks or the ones that have more pieces to them as we go along because there's some easier weeks in between some of the harder weeks. So don't stress out. It'll be okay. Grab your drawing and that way you can figure out your color placement. What I ended up doing this time is I did go and refer to pages 13 and 15 in the pattern because it tells you where each size goes. So it was a little easier because sometimes looking at the drawing, I would look at one of the log cabins and go, is that a medium? Is that a large? I'm not sure. So I made sure to refer back to the actual section layouts that tell you. It gives you the list of what's actually in each section and then just matched it with my drawing so that I made sure I was getting the right colors and the right pieces in the right places. For those of you that are new doing these log cabin blocks, I recommend laying out the block pieces before sewing, and I would technically call this kind of a half log cabin because most log cabins they go round circular. This is only doing two sides of the block, so kind of a cheater log cabin, but in the end you'll have cute blocks like these. And as you can see, so you start with your square and you're just going to go on the side and the top and then just keep going side and top until you finish. This is the medium. This is my large. And then mini. Mini are super teeny tiny. Now, one of the things that tricked me, because I don't always pay attention fully on patterns, can't imagine. The mini log cabins, look at your cutting measurements. I thought it was all the 1.5 inch pieces like everything else. They're actually 1 inch width by the each length. So make sure you're looking really close at those actual cutting measurements. Or you'd be like me. Fortunately, they at least cut wider than they needed to be and I just had to trim them down. But that way you make sure that your block is not the incorrect size. Otherwise, this block is really pretty simple. You're going to take your starter square with the first color closest to it, put them right sides together, sew them 1/4 inch as we always do, lining up your raw edges. And I'm just going to do a couple steps because it gets to be the same steps along, so I'm not going to bore you by doing all of it, but I'll just get you basic started points. Get my machine going. Because these are smaller pieces, you may want a stiletto to help keep your fabric in there and not squirming around. Because the biggest concern with this block can be that your fabric will start to get wavy if you don't keep that seam nice and straight. Just using my handy Elisa iron. Love this thing. Reminder, I do press open. To me, it keeps my seams less bulky. I'm dropping stuff off my chair. It's a good day. Okay, so you sew, you have, this is my center, this is color number 1. So then I take the rectangle, put it on the top, match it right sides together, match my corners, go take it to the machine, do my 1/4 inch seam. And we just keep doing that. We keep kind of going, you know, side, top, side, top. That's all you're going to do as you go. So, which is nice. You won't get confused by going around and losing track of your colors and all those kinds of things. Um, the other thing I'm going to tell you that you may not want to hear. Hey Diane, good job getting that large one done. Cause it's a big one. Is after you do two sides. So every time, so you're gonna have your center and do your two sides. I want you to measure it. I want you to put it down. I want you to take your ruler and make sure that it is within its measurements, and you'll know. Like this one is 2 inches. If it starts to kind of wonky out, you either can seam rip and redo, or I just kind of trim. So this one, I don't know that you can tell, but I've got a little bit of edge here on this outer side here. I'm going to trim that off. That way, as I'm adding the next piece on, this next rectangle, it doesn't start to follow that outer piece out, because if it did, my log cabin's going to start to kind of fan out, and that's not a fun time. That doesn't make a pretty log cabin. So I'm going to take it, and every time I get my two sides on, just like this guy, I'm going to measure it and I'm going to trim it, or if it's really bad, you want to take it apart and redo it. But this one's just a little bit extra because I'm using a scant seam. So sometimes it's a little wider than it needs to be. And so I just have a little tiny extra. I don't know that you can even see that little guy, that you're just going to shave off, so that when you do go put this piece on, you have a actual straight line, not a wonked out line, to keep your cabin still going. So that way your cabins stay nice and clean, your straight lines stay nice and clean, and you just keep going. So side to side, and you just keep measuring as you go. So like this one's now square again. So I'll lay it on my ruler. It looks fairly clean. I may have this little corner down here is starting to stretch out. So I'm going to trim that off before I add the next piece. So that's really all you're doing for this in the 3 different sizes. So you have 2 of the large, and it's just because you have 1 on each side of your butterfly. You have 6 of the mini, 3 for each side, and then 6 of the medium. The 6 minis, it's 3 on each side, and they actually line up in a row. They're adorable. And these are the ones, remember, that they're by 1 inch, not 1.5. And they're going to line up next to each other. Super cute. And the butterfly. So if you're not finding them in the diagram, you're going to find them tucked 3 together in a row in that kind of upper quadrant. So that's where those guys are hiding. And then your 6 medium, 1 of them is kind of up towards the top of the wing, and 2 of them are side by side, kind of next to each other towards the bottom section of the wing. So that's where those ones are hiding. And so if you're trying to find them for your coloring and those kinds of things, because as you can tell, I've got one that's kind of in the blue colorway, and then this is in kind of purples and peaches, because it's down lower in my color diagram in this guy. So they're down here in this prettier kind of peach and purple section. So find where it's at in your design. Lay out some of your other blocks that you have already going, so you can kind of see, is it going to butt up against another fabric? You may not want them to compete, or they may match and you don't want them to blend. So those kinds of things you may want to take into account as you're picking fabrics for these blocks. But other than that, the actual construction of them, it's pretty simple. I spent part of a day cutting them and then part of a day sewing them. So one good full day, you can knock out all of them for this week, or if you just have little bits of time here and there, that's all it takes sometimes is half hour, an hour to sit and plan your fabrics, a little half hour to do some cutting, and then a couple hours to do your sewing. So don't let it overwhelm you in thinking you have to do it all at one time. That's how I get a lot of my sewing done, so I just do it in little chunks. I do some color planning, and then when I have time I do cutting, and then I go do sewing. So don't always think of it as just one big thing. I'd probably never get it done if I had to have long periods of time to get all my sewing done. So sometimes just cutting it up makes it a little easier for you. But otherwise, the only other note I have is the large blocks. The pattern itself says it's 6 colors, but that is with the pattern actually repeating some of the colors. If you're doing like mine is, where there's a different color in every section, you actually need 8 colors. So I fortunately caught that before I actually started cutting. But I originally had only pulled 6 because that's what it said, and then figured out that it repeated, and I didn't want to repeat. So those large blocks are actually 8 separate colors if you're doing separate colors throughout the block. Otherwise, if you're following her actual design diagram, then it's 6, and you just repeat 2 of the colors. So those are just a few little things to catch that may throw you off if you're not really paying attention to the pattern. Otherwise, like I said, easy peasy. You guys got this. I'll go open up the room, so if anybody needs to chat, we can chat. Otherwise, you know how to track me down. Call me at the shop, email me, whatever. I'll gladly help you because this one does have a few more steps than some of the other patterns, but still, no, not too hard. We're just going to keep plugging along. And otherwise, go have some fun, have a good weekend, and I'll see you next Friday. Bye.